Good evening, everyone. I'm going to tell you a story tonight. This is a true story. There's a happy ending, and so if you can bear through the first part of it, it's quite dire. But as the story progresses, I suppose what is in this story for you is an idea. And the idea that just about anything is possible, but it requires some skills, and I'll explain them as we go through, and we'll have a talk about those skills right at the end. So, the problem is Payatas. So Payatas is a village, if you like, or a suburb of Metro Manila. Metro Manila, I'll just explain where we are on the planet so you all know where you are now. This is not going to show, but of course we're in Shanghai, and the Philippines is the red bit, and that's Indonesia underneath, and I come from Australia. And if you zoom in on the Philippines, this is this bit, this red bit in the middle is Manila. Now, Metro Manila has the Philippines has 144 million people in it. Metro Manila has 24 million, and it's made up of 7 cities, and they've merged together into a megalopolis. Okay, it's quite random and it's quite difficult to get around, but inside Metro Manila, the oldest part of Metro Manila is called Quezon City, and inside Quezon City is one of its suburbs, Payatas. Now, Payatas was a subdivision started by the past president, Ferdinand Marcos. So the next president decided this was a perfectly brilliant place to put all the municipal waste from Metro Manila. So they started to fill up a good portion of this with rubbish. And so at the moment, so it took, over an extended period, about, varied 4,000 to 5,000 metric tons of rubbish every day. And they filled a valley, and then they built a mountain, and it's about 1.5 kilometres long, and it's about 600 metres wide, and it's about 300 or 400 metres deep. So the story is about this rubbish heap, and arguably about this little girl. So as this rubbish heap came together, this wasn't a very desirable place to live. And so what happened was that very poor people moved in. It smells there, really, really smells. You pray that the wind is heading in the other direction when you're in that place. And but the poor people, they earn an economy off it. Firstly, they try and salvage food. If they can get food out of it, and it's kind of almost unimaginable and dire, they do. And then they take things for recycling, plastic bags, glass, steel, plastics generally. And they recycle that, or they sell it for upcycling. Even computer parts, they'll take them and sell them on for the precious metals or for the good parts of the computers. So there was an economy around this place, and this all started in 1980. And so for that period, these people have been generating an income off waste. And it worked, but it was meagre. Right? They're just making enough to survive. The conditions were so difficult generally that if the mother and the father weren't scavenging all day and their oldest children, then they wouldn't survive. They couldn't get enough food on the plate. This area is described as the poorest of the poor. It doesn't get poorer in the Philippines or pretty well anywhere that I've discovered. So I guess in the history of this place, not so long ago, in 1917, the scavengers undermined a large section. They tunnelled and they undermined it, and it slid down on top of them. It caused a landslide, and over 1,000 people died in that slide. They don't have the exact numbers, but it gives you an idea of how desperate this place is and the scale of it. Okay, so this is typical accommodation. This is the housing. people build their houses out of the waste. So they scavenge bits of material and they do what they can. They build stuff. And it's not great. It leads to all sorts of problems, mainly health problems, but also some serious sociological problems. And then, because the parents are working and the children are unsupervised, and often the older children are working, what happens is that the children are experimenting with sex way too early. And so as soon as the girls can have children, they are having them at 11 and 12 and 13. And that's because 35% of pregnancies that occur are unplanned. Okay. Now this area, despite it generating some income through waste management, has a 53% unemployment rate. Just so you can see what's going on here. That's a kitchen, right? And the floors are dirt, and there are pots and pans, and they have to bring in wood to burn. There's a gas bottle there which they use occasionally, but sparingly because gas is expensive for them. This is a picture of a veranda on the same house, and that little bright spot there's a cage with chickens in it, and they've got a light in there to keep them warm because they grow the chickens because they can eat them. And of course, because they're in a dump, everywhere looks like a rubbish heap, and it smells. Now, so that was my first visit before. That was in September last year. I went back again. So I went home. I went, ooh, this is not good. It wasn't one of my projects. It was just a side trip. Someone said, come and have a look at this. It's amazing. Well, it's more than amazing. Second trip, I was taken back again, November. So this is only a couple of months later. And the government was starting to fill the site with dirt. So they realised that they'd filled it so much that they couldn't take any more rubbish without it becoming just plain dangerous. So they buried the whole dump with 3 metres of soil so that rats and dogs wouldn't get into the rubbish and the smell would be suppressed. Well, they stopped the rats and the dogs, but certainly the smell is not suppressed. And the problem with doing this, well, there's several problems. If you cover rubbish, you know it composts, it gets very hot, and it creates methane as it rots. And when you get heat and methane, guess what happens? It blows up. That's one problem. The wastes are all liquefying and leaching down into the substrate and ending up in the stream, doing a huge amount of damage to the waterways and out to Manila Bay. Okay. But then that's not the worst problem. The worst problem is the economy in that area is gone. Okay? So these poorer than poor people now have had their economy chopped off. So of the people living in Payatas, and we know that there are 500,000 people living in Payatas. Doing demographic studies in that area, and I've been trying to get the right information, is incredibly hard because no one's registered. Land ownership is a mess because the title deeds office, the place where all of the documents that prove who owns which block of land, the government building, it burnt down with all of the records in it. So no one knows who owns what. And so essentially everyone is squatting. They're there informally. And so there's a lot of insecurity about doing anything. No one can move in. So if you can imagine, if the economy's gone, so we have 500,000 people in Payatas, 200,000 of them we estimate are in direct need of the waste stream to make money. Of 200,000, so that's about 30,000 families. A third of the families got up and they moved because the dump site moved. It moved 10 minutes up the road to a place called Montalban. And so they just took everything they had in wheelbarrows and trucks and dragging along the ground, and it was like an exodus. I can tell you I was there when it was happening, and there was just streams of people. So about 10,000 families were moving up the road towards this new location to set up their shantytown again to service the new waste so they could pick from that. Another third, they decided to commute. So they would take tricycles, which is a public transport there, or jeepneys, which is another form of public transport. And they're not expensive, but for their economy, very expensive for them to add to their daily cost back and forward to work. And you pay by the person. So if 2 or 3 or 4 people in the family are working, They're all paying the transport costs. But what do? That's my job. The job moved here, my house is here. So they just started doing that. And then they started to discover that they were running out of money very quickly. And it got to the point where they couldn't feed themselves and they started to take out loans. All right? I'll come back to the loans bit. The remaining third, they're just sitting there dazed. They don't understand what's happening. They're trying to get work where they can. They're doing labouring, they're doing cleaning, whatever. But they aren't able to feed themselves either. Right? So there's a lot of distress going on in this place late last year, right through to now. And so they're out there taking loans. And you can imagine what happens when you cut off the income into a whole region. There are people who used to rely on them to buy their products. And so there's another, maybe of the 30,000 families, or 200,000 people engaged in what we call rag picking, going through the waste dump. There was probably another 100,000 who are relying on them for their economy. So it's dominoed down through that community. So this whole thing about loans is very important, and this is sort of key to some of the social degradation. And it's where this gets a little bit hairy, so just hang in there. So they're taking out what's called microloans, and we're calling these people loan sharks because they act just like sharks. They're coming in with high interest microloans of about 40% per annum or more. Now, you all understand what a percentage is, don't you? Yeah? They don't. They don't have mathematics. They don't know what percentages are. They're just told, you know, it's 10%, but, you know, they don't realise that that's over 3 months or 2 months. And so they're confused and they're just getting money and they're happy. And then the loan sharks are coming back every 2 weeks and going, give me money, I need this, right? It's positively the worst form of usury I've seen for a long time. So these people can't pay. And the loan sharks are coming back and they're getting cranky at them. They're quite angry. You know, you have to pay, you prioritise this. Don't buy food, you must pay us first. And they're threatening. And these guys are, they're gangs basically. You know, it's quite frightening. So the people pay what they can, and then they do their best, and they still can't pay. So the loan sharks come back again the next fortnight and go, look, you're not paying, but you have a beautiful daughter. She can become a prostitute, she can work for us, and we'll pay it off that way. Or your son, he's very fit. He can run drugs for us. Pay it off this way. Or your children have 2 kidneys. Kidneys are 100,000 pesos each. Give up a kidney and we can clear the debt. Right? So these people, most of them, don't want to take that approach. This is too horrible to think of, right? So they just say, oh, no, here's all our money and we'll work harder, and they get extra jobs, but they just can't make it. And I'm sorry to have to tell it to you, but this is kind of important stuff to know, that this happens. And it's the thing that triggered me to react. First response. Research. How can this be happening? What's happening? Who are these people? How many are there? Yeah? Do they need help? Do they want our help? What sort of help do they need? And so we did. I went about doing this. It was automatic. You know, I had a choice. I could walk away, easy. I could go on to the next job. And so I thought, righto, well, there has to be another way. In the meantime, we're going to keep working on this problem. A solution will come. It must come. So we did research. We worked out where everything was, and you know, at the end of the day, I said to myself, look, I have these skills. I can work on this. I'm a master planner. I know how to get around these economic and you know, issues for these people and set them up again, and their infrastructure's wrong, they're missing this and they're missing that. I know people. When you get my age, you know a lot of people. And so some of them are influential. And I have a conscience. And that's what stopped me from walking away. I think, therefore I am. We all know that one. This one's better. I care, therefore I act. Don't walk away. So, second response, analysis. We got as much data as we could, as rapidly as we could. So we're moving in with a team, trying to work out what's going on. Now, I won't drive you all through this, but this is the poverty cycle that exists in Payatas. It's quite complex, but honestly, it's not complex enough. You get too much information, you can't deal with it. But it's all about limited no funds, lack of education, having to work too hard, can't get your education, goes on, right? And then we've got this added insult of their economy just being cut off right in the middle, which takes a very bad situation and makes it horrendous. This is where it gets happier. So we thought long and hard. We had good discussions. We met with lots of people, lots of experts in this area, and it came down to a very simple concept. So, old Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. We all know this one, yes? You must, you're in China. I know this and I live in Australia. So that's the basis of the cure. It's not the whole solution, but we can't do it without everyone in Payatas helping. So we got into some technical stuff, and this talk is not about the technical stuff. That's another talk. This is in response. This is the third response, and it involves engaging heroes. So we went out into the corporate world. I said, guys, you can make this waste into something else. They said, yeah, sure. Show us what the waste is. Great. We can make electricity, and lots. I went to another group, the Waste Management Corporation, and this is an interesting story because I followed that exodus of people up to the new waste place, and I was in there. It was very high security, and I managed to slip inside, and inside was the owner. He's only there once a month for 1 hour. And I was there at the same time, and I said, hey, I can make you a lot more money if I introduce you to some friends of mine. And he went, really? They're now in a joint venture. It's been signed up, right? And they've both promised, because now we're making a lot of money out of something that was a liability, it's now an asset. They've gone, sure, we'll give you 10%, no problem. You spend it on fixing that problem. Now, these were heart responses, but I tell you, they're also pocket responses. Everyone does better out of this because of the connections. You see this? And these are solutions for the environment, and they're solutions for the people of Payatas. It's a win-win-win, as they say. Okay, and then we have local heroes. This is my hero. This is Ardis Solar. She's about this tall. She is the most powerful person I know. For 20 years, she's gone into this place trying to help people. And when she sees there are children with no parents and they're just living in the muck and no one's looking after them, she finds out what's going on, and then she takes them and brings them up. Right? And her husband, Jodine Solar, is the founder of that foundation. It's called He Cares. I'm going to break a TED rule here. Very, very important group, and they do a huge amount. And year before last, they won World Vision. I don't know if you know World Vision, it's a big charitable group in the planet. They won Charity of the Year of the Planet award, the big one. And they deserve it, I can tell you. What they're doing, break your heart. The people of Payatas are also the heroes. So we haven't just gone in there and said, hey, we're going to help you and this is how we're going to do it, because that's very colonial. And I don't like colonialism. So that we've gone in there and we've asked the people there to select leaders, not politicians, grassroots leaders. And they've come up with about 7 people, and we meet them every 2 months, and we ask them, Now, can you imagine? We're asking them, what's your problem? Now, in public, if I asked you what your problem was right now, you're loath to say, oh, I've got pimples, and I don't have a girlfriend yet, and, you know, it's hard work, even when you're an adult, and particularly when the problems are so dire. You know, my 11-year-old child is pregnant, my son was just killed, you know, and I have a debt that's 5 times my capacity to earn, you know. So it's taken a while to get this out of them. But they're heroes in my mind, because eventually they've come to the point where they trust us and they're sharing their stories, and we're getting solutions for them, and they've agreed to tell that story around the community so that everyone can come and join and have a solution. And then finally, but not least, is the PNA Foundation, which was set up right in the middle of Payatas to help the really seriously affected people, and that's run by Father Paul Amawido. So you remember this girl? Now the story, the real story, is only half done. We've just got to the point where the money is about to kick in and we haven't started doing the real work on the ground, but it will happen. And so I hope that you get out of this a few things. One is that anything is possible if you have a serious enough problem or a big enough dream, and particularly if you can win the hearts and minds of people. They will come to you and you'll share that dream with them, and then you'll get a lot of expertise rolling behind you. This is very important. Just remember, the most important thing, to care, then act. Thanks very much.